Hello, I'm David Higgins and I'm Managing Director of H.R Higgins Coffee Man Limited, and I'm here with my dad Tony. His father, my grandfather, began our business in 1942, and we've both been roasting coffee pretty much all of our lives.
Yes. I don't think we can remember the first roast we did. It was such a long time ago.
No, not exactly which one it was, but I do remember very vividly how scary it was being left on my own to roast coffee for the first time. So what we've done is we have worked with Iain Burnett, the Highland Chocolatier, who is a prize-winning chocolate maker, and we've paired 4 of our coffees from our very large range of coffees with 4 very different chocolates.
And some of the coffees will be very familiar to many of our customers who've been with us for many years, and there'll be a few new ones, I'm sure, but this is going to be exciting.
Thanks for joining us today as we explore some new and exciting flavours with chocolate and coffee. From our large range of coffees, we have chosen 4 to pair with the chocolates, and we are going to try today the Costa Rica San Jose, which is being paired with a Milk Velvet Truffle. Then there's the Brazilian Yellow Bourbon, which we've paired with a Dark Velvet Praline. Then we move on, our third one is the Nicaragua Blueberry Candy, which we've paired with a White Raspberry and Heather Honey Velvet Truffle. And finally the strong Creole Blend, which is paired with a Dark Velvet Truffle. So the first coffee that we're going to make is the Costa Rica San Jose. So as we would always recommend, we've wetted the filter paper first just to remove any papery flavours. So I'm just going to weigh the coffee. And this coffee that comes with the tasting flight is in fact pre-ground. You can buy beans and buy the chocolate separately, that's not a problem if you prefer to grind your own, of course. So I've put 14 grams of coffee into the filter paper, and when we make the coffee, the first thing to do with the pour over is just to wet the grounds, and that allows the grounds to swell up and bloom, and that aids in the process of brewing the coffee. It just opens up all the molecules of the ground coffee, and we do that and wait for about 30 seconds before we start pouring again. And the reason we use the Hario V60 system, I think this is probably the best and the purest way of drinking coffee and getting the most facets of flavour to be apparent when you drink it. It's the way that really that doesn't promote or demote specific flavours like some coffee makers, like an espresso machine where the coffee's made under pressure. You're highlighting all of the flavours to such an extent they become quite extreme, whereas the filter method is very good because it makes a really full-bodied cup of coffee, but it has a nice balance between all the flavour components within the coffee. And whenever we make the coffee in the V60, we always pour it in a pulse by rotating the jug and pouring in a circular motion, finishing in the middle. So this pulse pouring is the best way of reducing a lot of the acidity that might be in the coffee, and giving more body and a better balance of the flavour. And it should take about 2 minutes for the for the water to filter through the grounds. Any longer than that and it becomes rather over extracted. Right, so we've poured our coffee, and now it's time to taste.
Thank you. Traditionally, we always used to refer to Costa Rica as the little Switzerland of the coffee world because of its natural terrain. It's a country that's long produced really quality coffee.
So this is a honey processed coffee, and that refers to the way in which the coffee beans are removed from the cherry. So obviously there's various ways of doing that, and however you do that will affect the flavour. So the honey process is sort of a halfway stage really between wet processed coffee, in which the cherries are pulped and then the beans in their sticky mucilage are fermented in tanks, or the natural process where the cherries are just dried in the sun. And this, they're pulped, but then they're not fermented in tanks, they're simply dried in the sun. So with the mucilage on, giving it this sort of honeyed flavour.
Very distinctive. I like this slight acidity.
Yes, it's quite bright, delicate acidity. It's just on the tip of the tongue, but very bright.
And with the fullness in the background.
Right.
So
we're now going to try this with the chocolate.
Oh. That's very silky smooth. Do you get that?
Yeah, a little bit nutty.
Yeah, just in the background.
Yeah.
Not
with a kind
over.
of soft caramel sweetness.
It's not overdone.
No.
Really good. I think that's a perfect match for this Costa Rican coffee.
It really contrasts it well, and actually it brings out the sweetness of the coffee more, having had the chocolate.
Neither dominates the other, they're both there. Great.
Yeah, good. So now we're trying our second choice, the Brazilian Bourbon, which is a yellow bourbon coffee with a dark velvet truffle. So we've poured our coffee through the V60 as before for 2 minutes, having poured it 3 times and wetted the paper before we started. So let's see how this is. So, yellow bourbon, interesting. It refers to the bean variety, which originated on the island of Bourbon, now La Réunion.
We always wanted to get bourbon. I remember in my father's time in the business, we couldn't really get bourbon varieties of Brazil because at that time the Brazilian farmers wanted to grow varieties that cropped quicker than this. So my father used to say, if only we could get the bourbon. And it's a different shaped bean. My father used to say it's got a slightly square end. Like, they're not really square, but the bourbon variety has got an extra subtlety to it rather than as opposed to just an ordinary 17.
And this is a yellow bourbon, which of course is like a hybrid version of bourbon in which the cherries only ripen to a yellow colour, and they ripen earlier than a traditional red bourbon. And I think it's something that, it's literally a mutation that happened about 90 years ago. They just discovered it, suddenly producing this coffee. It's got a very nutty flavour.
It has.
Really quite hazelnut. So if we try that with Dark Velvet
This is
Praline.
Dark Velvet Praline.
It's obviously some nut. Very nice.
Very rich. Isn't it?
Yes,
Fills the mouth.
lovely.
What's that hint at the back you're getting?
Well, I'm getting strong nut.
I'm just getting almost a
Hazelnut.
strawberry feel at the back.
Yeah, maybe like a sort of mouth feel.
I think that's a lovely pairing.
Because now the bourbon is showing that brightness as well. More of the, not so much acidity, just the sweetness of it that's coming through. Because the chocolate is so intense. Where the coffee just cuts through it nicely. With
Yes,
a
yes.
sweet finish.
There's definitely a sweetness there, which is very, very interesting.
It's always been one of my favourites, this coffee anyway.
Yes.
Bourbon. Very interesting farm, Brazil de Terra, where it's from. Very experimental.
Well, they go to amazing lengths.
Yes, and they share all the knowledge that they
That's
do
amazing.
for free with other coffee farms. So they
Yeah.
really are helping to push the boundaries of coffee production.
Great.
And, we're only too happy to be a part of that. So we're now starting on our third coffee, the Nicaraguan La Bastilla Blueberry Candy, and we've ground up our 13 grams of coffee, ready for 2 cups. This is a naturally processed coffee, so basically the coffee cherries are picked and then just dried in the sun, so that the outer cherries just swell up, and because they have a kind of cherry flavour, it makes for a very intense fruitiness. It's really imbued into the coffee beans, unlike the wet process where you have a much more
I think you
acidity.
said on one occasion that on the tree they swell up looking like a dark Malteser.
Yeah, well, if
chocolate.
you can get dried on the tree as well. These aren't dried on the tree; they are dried on racks. Of course, in order to do that, to achieve an even drying and a stable flavour, they have to keep turning and turning the coffee over and over again, very, very carefully. Otherwise, you can get very peculiar flavours. Because this is a very intense coffee, and we know a lot of customers.
You either love this.
Yeah.
There's no second.
No, it's very,
Thoughts?
very either or.
It's a sad thing that politics has played a negative roles in so many coffee producing countries, and Nicaragua has been through tremendous amounts of upheaval over the years, and a tribute to this coffee farm that they're producing this special flavoured coffee.
Yes, and of course we know Marcus Fisher, who owns this farm, who's been in Nicaragua for many years now. I forget how many years he's been living there, 40 years, something like that. And we first met him in Duke Street and got to know him, and he prepared this lot of coffee specially for us, because obviously on their farm they can produce coffee in many different ways and processes. But this one is so unusual, so unique.
It's very well. You don't describe it almost boozy.
It's got a kind of boozy quality. Yeah, and a sort of blueberry, but very low in acidity, not sharp at all. So I'm going to try it with the chocolate.
Try the chocolate.
Wow.
That's quite ziggy on my palate.
Very. So this is the white raspberry with a hint of heather, honey, truffle.
I've got the raspberry, and now that honey is just coming through in the background.
Yes. Yeah, it's very warming afterwards, isn't it? After the intense fruitiness of the raspberry.
And it goes very well with this special coffee, this unusual coffee.
So I found that really interesting because obviously the coffee, when you taste that first, it's got that very rich blueberry, boozy quality. And then the chocolate is so intense with the raspberry. After you've had the chocolate and then you take the coffee in again, then you're left with all the sweetness out of the coffee. And the raspberry is somehow intensified.
It's a really good pairing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one to do, but it's a really amazing combination. So here's our fourth pairing, our Creole Blend. The most popular coffee we sell, actually. So this is a darker roast coffee. As you can see, the beans themselves are darker in colour than all the other ones that we tried so far.
And the natural oils have begun to come out.
Yes, the sugars that were in the beans have caramelised and broken onto the surface. So we're expecting this to have very little acidity and a lot of body and a lot of a dark chocolate aftertaste. Now this is a blend, of course, that my granddad
he invented it. Yes, that's right.
He named it Creole because,
well, he thought it was a good South American name, frankly.
So yeah, very intense, very dark.
Yes,
good black.
Quite dominating.
You can have that with milk and it doesn't smother it at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah, no acidity to speak of.
No.
But a smoky, dark,
richness,
rich flavour.
Right, the chocolate.
Yes. And actually, I think a version of this truffle won the world's best truffle.
Did it?
Yes, more than once. So you can't really get a better truffle.
Absolutely. Well, it goes very well with this.
Because of the smoky intensity is still there in the coffee. But the chocolate is really just boosting the whole body of the coffee.
It is.
But I can still taste the blackcurrant at the end, which is a sort of typical tasting note of a very dark roast coffee.
Yeah, I think that finishes any meal with the chocolate, with a real super finale.
Well, that's really been interesting for me, I think.
Yes.
All the years we've been roasting coffee together, this has enabled us to enjoy our coffee that we know so well in quite a new way.
Yes. My father always said you never stop learning.
No.
And I think this is true of this experience.
Yeah.
It's been a whole new learning experience for us too.
Yeah, it has. And we really hope you enjoy tasting and trying these coffee and chocolate combinations as much as we have. Thanks.